being here today. My name is Justine Gincola. I'm on the corporate communications team, and I get the opportunity as the host of Innovators, our thought leadership podcast series, to sit down with industry experts, just like our panelists here today. And I'm so excited to be with this group and doing this live at Empower today. We just heard from Rajesh, and now we're going to go a little bit deeper, take some of those themes into how they impact healthcare specifically. So, guys, let's go ahead and get started. First question open to the group. What are some of the biggest opportunities to apply AI and ML in healthcare, and what is the role that data plays in those AI models?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here. There is no AI strategy without data strategy. So getting that data foundation right is a crucial first step. And one thing that excites me most is how we can apply AI to data engineering principles. Today, we are seeing AI helping us extract meaningful information and insights from unstructured healthcare documents. To me, this is a breakthrough in terms of how we are able to tap into the disparate and siloed and variety of patient data that we have. So it helps build that entire patient profile, so-called. So that's definitely number one. And then AI has ability to impact the business functions across the value chain of healthcare and life sciences. The way I put it is AI can assist, augment, or accelerate. Assist in terms of AI helping us to optimize the operational and administrative tasks that we see from a healthcare perspective. For example, ambient listening technologies, listening when a patient and a provider is having a conversation and capturing clinical notes. And AI taking a first stab at coming up with a discharge summary, right? All of these are AI applied to reduce the documentation burden, reduce the operational overhead of the clinicians. And then AI can augment clinicians in care delivery. This is AI playing a role of a co-pilot at best. This is AI providing nudges and suggestions in terms of, hey, this patient might have this problem. Or when a patient is getting presented with certain symptoms in the hospital, this is about AI coming up with the differential diagnosis and presenting it to the clinicians. And then clinicians are the ones that are accountable, who are using this information to essentially engage the patients and come up with their right fit clinical care pathway. And then AI can accelerate in terms of AI helping speeding things up from a research context. This is about what I usually call is what used to take hours in terms of pruning through medical journals and getting to a summary of a certain medical journal from something like PubMed is now a prompt away. We can just throw the entire PubMed contents, vectorize it, and ask a natural language question to get the medical journals of interest and summarize them, which we can read it through in a few minutes. The potential is immense.
Rahul?
So, hey, everybody, it's great to be here. I'm Rahul Pathak, and I agree. I think AI has, well, I'm told AI can get me better hair and make me taller, but hype aside, I do think AI can be transformative. I think it'll lead to better patient outcomes and better business outcomes. And really, I think it's really important for all of us to think about what we're trying to accomplish and then think of AI as a force multiplier to help us get to those goals faster. And I don't think AI is going to replace everything that we do. I do think it is a force multiplier. I think it will augment the things that we do. And I think one of the advantages in healthcare is that A, we have a ton of data. B, we've invested a lot in thinking about good data foundations and governance and good processes for checks and balances. And I think in that context, AI applied to accelerate the things that we do day to day can really help us take advantage of that in a safe and responsible way. And so I think it's an incredible time with all of the innovations that we're seeing to really get to better business and patient outcomes with AI.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Vinod Mamtani, and thank you for having me here. So I think AI has the potential to be the foundation for a modern, secure healthcare system. AI technology is considered to be very complex, but it doesn't have to be that way. And if you look at different facets of healthcare where you have patients, providers, pharmacies, life sciences, AI has an opportunity to impact every different aspect with the goal of driving better outcome for patients, for providers, automating and eliminating tedious, mundane tasks, improving patient outcomes here, automating revenue, life cycles, improving clinical trials, and so on. We are already starting to see application of AI for patients when it comes to registration, when it comes to scheduling appointments, the patient-provider communication that happens, whether it's discharge summary or whether it's getting authorization letters for insurance companies. We are seeing improvements in clinical trials with application of AI, and I think most of the innovative cases are still ahead of us.
Yeah, and agree with all of the great folks here. And like I covered, I actually think of the applications of AI, particularly in healthcare, across maybe 3 different sort of strata. The first is just automating business processes, and this is in many ways sort of like the obvious, real, almost low-hanging fruit opportunity we've got here. There's a lot of business process in healthcare, as we're all aware, that we think we can accelerate with AI. The second is sort of decision-making elements of the value chain. So think claims denials, like we talked about, prior authorization, right? How do we actually kind of get to a point where some of those decisions can be automated, but more importantly, be explainable as well? One of the challenges with AI, obviously, is explainability and the importance of that, particularly in healthcare. That's critical. And it's only after that we get to sort of like the sort of magical promise of AI that you see in the movies, which is like, type in your symptoms and you get back you must have this disease. I think it's going to take us a long while to get to that point. Perhaps not as long as long means, and these days long is like a year before our world is changed again, like Keith said yesterday. But yeah, massive opportunity ahead of us. But in a lot of ways, it's really going to be driven by kind of how much we commit to it as well, especially as the healthcare community here. That's really what's going to go drive this transformation.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Kind of a follow-up, Murali, we'll start with you. Looking at that patient specifically, how are these emerging technologies impacting the personalized care and patient engagement aspects?
Yeah, let's take the personalized care first, right? If you look at it, it can be looked at from 3 different dimensions. Number 1 is, if you want a personalized care, we need to understand the patient holistically. And what that means is we should be able to tap into every single data point that we have about the patient, and more importantly, extract meaningful insights and put them together. And that's, it goes back to the point I was making earlier. How do we apply AI? Because we are in healthcare. We deal with faxes still today, and probably going to deal with faxes in the foreseeable future. Doing a simple OCR extraction, which is AI-based extraction of the content in a PDF document, which can be a clinical notes, lab results, or so on and so forth, and extracting and putting that information is so vital and crucial, number 1 step. The second step is really applying AI to come up with the personalized care path for a patient. And this involves putting together the genotypic data of the patient with the phenotypic data and truly identifying, okay, here is the genomic variance that has the potential to have a drug reaction in a certain way, right? So if there are 2 therapy regimes, one drug is proven to be more effective with people with certain genetic variants, associating and correlating that and surfacing it up when the patient's care path is being determined is super critical, right? And that's truly how we personalize medicine in terms of making sure that the therapy is going to have a positive outcome on the patient, right? And that's step number 2. And then the step number 3 is the therapies in itself getting more and more contextualized to the patients. And for example, cell and gene therapy, right? It is about super hyper-personalizing the therapy that we provide for a particular patient. So AI definitely has played a role to play across all of these dimensions, right? And then patient engagement is a little bit of a different topic, but if you take a look at patient engagement, if you want to have patient engaged better, we really need to understand the barriers to the patient engagement, right? Which is usually communication related, access to care, access to information, disparate, fragmented information, and that kind of leads into lower motivation, and thereby patients are disengaged. I think AI is going to disrupt this field by being the co-pilot for the patients. We talk about clinicians co-pilot, AI, right? But I think it's going to be a co-pilot to the patients, truly helping them answer any sort of healthcare questions that they have, so they are well-informed, and when they are well-informed, patients tend to get engaged better, right?
Vinod, anything to add?
Yeah, so I like to use an example from one of the most recent launches from Oracle. This is around clinical digital assistant. So how many of you have been to a doctor's office only to find that the doctor is sitting behind a computer and typing notes there? And occasionally they will look into your eyes and maybe react to your responses. So with clinical digital assistant, we have tried to eliminate that kind of friction there. It's a very hard problem, right? You could have patient bringing in their parents if they're minors, or bringing in their spouse or partners. And doctor may be accompanied by a nurse practitioner. And with CDA, you could have AI just completely generating transcripts for all the conversation that's happening. It updates patients' charts, and it can also place order for tests or pharmacy, as the case may be. So this is an example where you could actually personalize the experience by applying AI.
It's wonderful. So a lot of opportunity here, but of course with that comes some barriers. So Rahul, we'll go to you. What are some of the biggest barriers to implementing AI at scale?
So to implement AI at scale, I think it's really important to start with an outcome that you're trying to accomplish for your business or your patients and work backwards from that. That's something that we really believe in, and often we find that with our customers, if you have a clear outcome in mind, you can then really start to put AI to work in production. And so we have customers like Pfizer that's working on optimizing their clinical trial and drug discovery process, or GE Healthcare that's working on building foundation models. But all of these are aimed at really getting to faster time to market, more efficiency, taking cost out of the process, or getting better, more personalized care for individual patients. And once you've got that use case in mind, then it's about setting up to achieve that. And I think at its core, to really take advantage of AI, you want to get your data connected to these AI systems, because ultimately, what we're trying to do is democratize access to AI for all of you. And if that's the case, the way you really differentiate is with data. So how do you get your data connected to AI systems in a way that's secure and private? How do you connect that to driving a business outcome? And then how do you adapt the people and processes within your organizations to really start to use that system? And I think it's really important to lean into figuring out how to change your workflows to use AI as a way to augment getting to those business results. Because the more you learn, the more you'll unlock productivity within the organization.
Vinod, anything to add?
Yeah, totally agree with Rajesh there. It needs to be outcome driven. We also need to think about customer experiences. So AI at scale goes far beyond just building and training models. It starts with having high quality data sets, having production pipelines, monitoring the quality of inputs, having infrastructure and hardware for training models, deploying these models at scale so that you can handle the call volume for the requests that come through, monitoring for data drifts or model drifts, ensuring that these models are just trained appropriately, not overfitting or underfitting. Needs to be fully outcome-driven, fully customer-driven, and then scaling it accordingly.
Rajesh, how about anything specific to health?
Yeah, and maybe from a healthcare perspective, there's we obviously cliche to talk about the importance of the quality of data. In healthcare, it's kind of like, to me, it's crossing the trust chasm almost, because the downside of getting this wrong is literally life or death. Right, so it's really fundamentally important to kind of get to a point where you've kind of got really the ecosystem, everyone involved, every entity in the system, sort of to trust that we'll actually get it right. So explainability is really critical. Decision making and how those decisions are arrived at, and kind of helping to build that trust and getting past that trust chasm is actually going to be fundamental. And if there's one thing about healthcare, we tend to move slowly. We're the industry that keeps the fax machine alive, and so AI can be kind of somewhat challenging because it's still not gotten to a point where we can trust it. So that's going to be perhaps the biggest barrier for AI in healthcare, and in many ways it's also the opportunity we have here, because we're all kind of looking at a brand new world forming in front of us, so we kind of have that opportunity to go shape it.
All right, now looking at safety, and Murali, we'll start with you here. How can technology organizations ensure the security of healthcare data, and what are the safety considerations that come to mind when it comes to AI in cloud environments?
Yeah, I'll split these answers from the context of data and the AI separately. Let's look at it from the context of data. We all know in healthcare we deal with very sensitive data, PHI and PII information. We also deal with financial information, which sometimes is deemed sensitive. But from a data perspective, the way I look at healthcare organizations' approaches is it's like a layered approach of security and controls. Number one is it starts with encrypting data at rest, encrypting data in motion, coming up with the right level of network security, and all of the cloud vendors and the software as a service providers, we are the ones who essentially provide that level of security. That's layer number one, right? And the layer number two is tokenizing data at rest. So you are de-tokenizing based on the keys, and the keys are made available to the trading partners, to the people who only has access to the data, right? So that's layer number two. And then the layer number three is how do you connect the security and the related technology to the people and process, right? You have data, you have the fundamental infrastructure and network security, you have the data encrypted, you have the data tokenized, but when the data is being consumed, who has access to what? Defining that from a context of access controls and providing, here is a clinician population, they have access to this set of patient population, they should only have access to that patient population. They should not have access to some other patient population, right? This is row-level data security, right? And then we have certain people who doesn't have access to PHI information. What that means is we should be able to mask the column contents when that person is trying to view a PHI information, right? So that applying that level of access controls is layer number three. And then layer number four is de-identifying and anonymizing the data when the data is being made available from a context of healthcare research. Now, there is a increasing adoption of something called differential privacy. And this essentially sits between the layer 3 and 4, right? If you de-identify or anonymize data to a large extent, oftentimes it loses its statistical significance, right? That's what differential privacy is addressing. What it essentially does is it's a policy that sits on top of the data and restricts the analysts or the consumers of the data get to an individual patient level information, but it allows them to ask a statistical or an aggregate question to the data, right? Give me the mean age of the patient population. You'll be able to get out of the differential privacy. But what you won't be able to do is, can I select star from the patient table, right? Which will give you individual patient level information, right? So this is how healthcare organizations can layer their data security and make sure that it starts with the infrastructure and the same network security and goes all the way up to how the data is being organized and made available and consumed with the right level of access control, with the right level of access to the right level of people. Right, from a data perspective. And then from an AI perspective, it goes back to what Rajesh was taking. It's about trust, right? So the way I put it is, it's a 3-layer process. You take AI training and qualification. When the models are being trained, we need to make sure that the models are not learning from individual patients' PHI, PII information. We needed to make sure that we are introducing controlled noise to gradients as the machine learning models are trained. So the model has some level of general capabilities, not having a individual patient level information. And there are coalitions getting formed, like Coalition of Health AI, CHAI. There are processes and frameworks being put in place to ensure that the models that are being built are reviewed from a context of safety and bias and trustworthiness when it comes to AI in healthcare. And then from an inference perspective, it's about providing guardrails in terms of how do we do prompt filtering? How do we provide topic filtering? So we don't expose a large language model and I have somebody ask a question, how do I build a bomb, for example, right? This is about restricting the LLMs answering questions like that. We call it as guardrails from an inference perspective. And then how do we deploy this from a business function perspective? Are we looking at deploying it as a co-pilot or an autopilot, right? Are we going to have humans in loop or not having humans in loop, right? All of this is going to drive how AI is going to be consumed in a safe way when it comes to our industry. Great. I know I gave a long-winded answer, but this is an important topic.
It is very important. Thank you. Rajesh, anything to add?
I think we've hit sort of like all of the high-tech aspects of this that need to get addressed. Like, it's really important to not forget the basics, right? Like, it's funny that if you think about some of the challenges that we've had from a security perspective in our industry, they've actually been sort of results of sort of some of the core basic stuff. Security patching not being done on time, or right, like social engineering, et cetera. So super important to go sort of remember that, again, back to sort of the point from earlier, like the impact of these things going south is even larger to healthcare than anywhere else. So it's even more fundamental for us to get the basics right. Like, we've got to be patching systems. We've got to be keeping updating our system. Modernization is a really key aspect of driving security across the board. So,
Rahul, anything to add?
Yeah, if I could add a little bit. I mean, I think the most secure computer system in the world is one that is not plugged into power and not connected to the internet. It's also the most useless computer system in the world. So security is critical. It's job zero. It's something we take super seriously at AWS. I fully agree with Rajesh. You've got to think about the fundamentals. But it's not something to be afraid of, and it shouldn't paralyze us. Like, it's a challenge we can overcome if we're disciplined and we pay the right attention to it. And thinking about it, getting it right, is actually the key to unlocking value, because getting your data securely interacting with the technology you're trying to build to achieve the outcomes you're going for is the path to actually generate value.
All right, and Rahul, we'll stay with you here. At the foundational level, what does data quality mean to your organization, and what does maintaining quality through that pipeline look like?
Data quality is critical, and I'll probably repeat this many times, but I'm sure all of you know we often feel like we're repeating things, and the important things are worth repeating. But really, data is your differentiator, right? In a world where anyone can access technology, the things that you know that are unique about your business, about your patients, that's how you're going to generate value that's unique to your organization, how you'll stand out. And in order to be able to use data as a differentiator, data quality is paramount. Garbage in, garbage out for these systems. So you need to be able to have trusted data that you can rely on, that represent the source of truth for the organization. You also need good governance on your data. And there's a quote from a book called Extreme Ownership that I love, and the quote is, "Discipline equals freedom." And I think when you think about this in the data context, when you have good governance and you have good guardrails, you can set the organization free to innovate. And that's when you're really going to start to see what's possible. And so I think thinking about good data quality, good data governance, and not being afraid of security, but leaning into it, that's going to let you then proceed as quickly as possible to drive differentiated outcomes for your business and your patients.
Thanks.
Well said, Rahul. So what I'll do is I'll actually enhance this response with a couple of examples that I've read about. So one is the swivel chair problem, and this is not where Jefferson was inventing swivel chair while authoring the Constitution. This is where there is a gap between clinical trial and healthcare. So many researchers, they spend enormous amount of time just copying data from one system into another, and this is all manual entry tasks. There is an opportunity to bridge this gap. So you take data from EHR and then through EDC, bring it into the clinical trial system. So basically what researchers do is they have like two screens. There's one screen for EHR, one for clinical trials, and they're manually copying data. To just look at the enormity of this problem, let's say there is an oncology trial and it has, say, 3 million data points. A researcher over 3 to 4 years may be spending 3 minutes on each data point. So that's like tens of thousands of hours that are spent. And there are like nearly 4,000 oncology trials that start in a given year. By bridging these systems, it's possible to bring data and improve the performance of clinical trials. And it gets even better or worse, the way you look at it. Many doctors are not aware of all the clinical trials that are happening. And these trials are also looking for patients, and they have no idea about which patients to go recruit. So having data, a high-quality data set, is fundamental at solving this problem. Another example I like to use is with enhancing EHR. So companies like Oracle are building EHR agnostic systems where you can bring data from disparate providers and combine them in a longitudinal record so that it's available for a patient. So when a patient goes to an emergency room that's out of the network, we don't want doctors to be spending time trying to look for data. We want them to be able to have access to the data and just look at the data and start treating the patient.
Rajesh, follow-up for you here. When looking at the benefit of using primary source versus the risk of secondary, talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a little bit of what I covered earlier today as well. It's pretty fundamental to kind of like understand the source of the data that you have, because there's so much of it floating around. And there's all of these machinations that happen on the data before it gets to you. In real life, it turns out that the value of that data kind of diminishes the more transitions that have happened through its life cycle as it's got to the point of analysis. So really kind of important to sort of make sure that you've got it as close to the source of the data. You may end up having to deal with a lot more rawness of the data, but it's much more precise. And then you can kind of do the analytics based on the outcome that you're driving through the models that you're building. So that's kind of like an important consideration. Think about the data journey into analysis.
Absolutely. All right. We're at time here, guys. We're going to do rapid fire, 30 seconds each. Our audience here is shaping the future of healthcare. So what advice would you give to them? Raleigh, we'll start with you.
Look, I'm on the really optimistic side of AI, where I strongly believe AI is going to truly reshape healthcare for good. We're going to see drugs being invented at a pace that we have never seen before. We are going to see precision medicine as a new normal. We're going to see patients getting engaged better and better. And one thing I'll leave this audience with is, as you embrace these technologies, you leave the underlying infrastructure management, the platform management, because the technology changes fast. Leave it to the technology partners and providers, and you focus in terms of how do you really engage the patients better, how do you serve the patients, how do you deliver better experience to the patient.
Cool.
So we're in a place today where AI is driving real production outcomes for customers and for patients. And so I think if you just keep this in mind, it's really driving value today. Data is your key differentiator. Discipline equals freedom. Think about governance and security, but don't be afraid of it. And then the final thing I'd say is this is happening now. And I think if you're not leaning in, you're going to be left behind. I really believe it's time to really think about how you can apply this technology and use it as a force multiplier to drive better outcomes for your businesses and your patients.
So we being technologists have a high degree of optimism. It's okay to have the right dose of skepticism, but the time to get started is now. The technology has evolved, and it's important to start now so that you don't get left behind. And AI is impacting every industry vertical, including healthcare.
Yeah, and I'll reiterate all of that with sort of a slight nuance in that we are actually going to decide whether this is going to bend in the right way for healthcare. It's us. It's all of us in the system actually using it for all of the use cases that we see day in and day out that are going to go decide whether this is bending in the direction of like trust and value, or is it kind of going to go, the direction of the dodo and sort of like turn out to be yet another technology innovation that never hit real life in the way we intended it to. So really important to keep that balance in mind.
Wonderful. Thank you all for sitting down today. And thank you guys for being here. Enjoy the rest of the day at Empower.